The following is a true story experienced by the author, the owner of this channel, EmyyWolf. The Lost Phone. It was a regular summer night when Fat Tinkerbell was driving around the outskirts of the enormous maze. She was minding her own business as she tends to, doing her job in peace, patrolling and looking around for crime or misconduct or issues, as her new job requires her to do. Basically, it was a boring summer night. Full moon blasting the night sky. Everyone in the maze partying and hanging out, restaurants in the maze all open and selling. Everything seemed to be all right. The team captains working that night were Harry Potter, RoboCop, and Weed Guy. Probably some of the other regular team members on Fat Tinkerbell's level too, but they're irrelevant. After what had happened with the write-up, Fat Tinkerbell already kind of figured what type of people Harry Potter and RoboCop were. She felt uneasy around them. She wouldn't trust them with her life. They were bad people. It was already clear that Harry Potter and RoboCop wanted her gone. It was clear that they disliked her. Probably even hated her. Let's keep in mind that these two managers were there to supervise their employees. Fat Tinkerbell at the time was not only new to the job, but she was also just another dumb employee. Nobody there knew her or cared for her. Not only that, but Fat Tinkerbell there was extremely obese, extremely light-skinned, and barely took care of her physical appearance regarding her hair, facial hair, and uniform. So you could already imagine what kind of impression Fat Tinkerbell was giving off. Fat Tinkerbell was completely careless of her physical appearance and well-being, which on top of everything, kept her shy and pure in a way. It kept her from pulling in men. It kept her looking like Fairy Mary. But, back to the story. That night there were 3 knights on shift. 3 young jerks that most likely didn't like new little red fat obese Tinkerbell all that much or at all. Something new had happened to Fat Tinkerbell that night. Something she wouldn't have imagined would ever happen to her. These 3 grown men bullied Fat Tinkerbell like never before. The Weed Guy never really interacted with Fat Tinkerbell and he seemed irrelevant, but because he was really close with Harry Potter and RoboCop, Fat Tinkerbell wouldn't trust him or care to, ever. She just included him as one of the jerks. Fat Tinkerbell was patrolling at night on the exterior of the maze that one January of 2019. It was clear that the 3 knights were hanging out together in the tiny little office, where they would love to be hanging out together talking for hours like best friends. So basically the 3 of them were nowhere to be found outdoors. Fat Tinkerbell noticed 2 girls on the parking lots laughing at something. She noticed that these 2 girls were dying laughing at something on their phone, and wouldn't stop staring at it. Fat Tinkerbell dismissed it and continued moving along. After a while, Fat Tinkerbell decided to patrol around that area, and once again she saw the same 2 girls on that parking lot in the same exact position laughing at the phone just like she saw them earlier. Fat Tinkerbell then thinks to herself, WTF? Fat Tinkerbell got all suspicious and worried. She was already uneasy thinking about how the 3 knights hate her. When she came around where the 2 girls were, the 2 girls were now gone. Fat Tinkerbell looks around to see where they went, so she moved ahead of that area where they had been, just a little bit. Suddenly, and out of nowhere, an older, taller woman shows up next to Fat Tinkerbell to talk to her. The 2 girls were now with her and they looked all smiley and giggly. The woman tells Fat Tinkerbell that they have a lost phone with them and wish to turn it into someone. As the mother hands Fat Tinkerbell a phone, the 2 girls begin laughing secretly while looking at Fat Tinkerbell. Fat Tinkerbell, being the caring, heroic type of person that she is, accepts the lost phone from these people, thanks them, and moves along. Fat Tinkerbell senses that something was off, mainly because those 2 girls were laughing while looking at her as she accepted the phone. Or maybe laughing at just her. It is already known that Fat Tinkerbell looked all cringeworthy. But Fat Tinkerbell felt uncomfortable overall because of the fact that those 2 Harry Potters and RoboCop hate her. When Fat Tinkerbell looked at the phone, it was this regular-looking Android phone, green case, damaged, screen very cracked, type of phone. Instinctively she presses the buttons to see if it works at all, and it did. The phone was definitely not iOS or Apple. As soon as she realized that it works, she sees the screen where you swipe to the top and it unlocks. Fat Tinkerbell automatically swiped up and guess what? It was unlocked. It had some apps on it, maybe 3 at the top left. It looked all hacked, but it seemed to work just fine. Fat Tinkerbell goes back to the memory of how those two girls were laughing. And she then reminds herself that every time you are new to a job, the bosses see you through cameras and inspect your every move and performance. She reminds herself that she already has a write-up from Harry Potter and also reminds herself that those three jerks, those three bosses are using any and every situation to get her fired. Another rule is that employees like Fat Tinkerbell are not to be on a phone or their personal phone while on the job, while on duty. Which is the rule that got Fat Tinkerbell written up in the first place. Or what Harry Potter used to get back at her and be able to write her up. She began to wonder about whether to look through this lost phone or not to. Like basically go through that stranger's unlocked phone. Which alone is already an effed up thing to do. Or the other option, which is to turn the phone into her supervisor, RoboCop, that night. Fat Tinkerbell, being the curious little thing that she is, she sits it through in that vehicle that she's patrolling in, at night, in the darkness, with her flashing vehicle lights on. She thinks it through whether to turn it in and miss out on all that information of that unlocked phone or know the secrets inside the unlocked stranger's phone. After a minute of driving around thinking and trying to make sure there is zero Harry Potters and RoboCops in sight, she looked around as much as she could, looked and looked. Until she made sure there was no one. She later decided to park in a secret-looking dark area. She was also unsure of there being any recorders or cameras inside the vehicle where her bosses or these captains could possibly see her or what she is doing, but it was unlikely. Fat Tinkerbell checked around a little bit more. It was very clear that the three jerks were in the office hanging out. So she chooses to go with the option of looking into and going through the stranger's lost unlocked phone instead of not doing it. Which is the worst thing she could have done. When she opens up the phone, she noticed again the apps in the screen and how the apps were all messed up. There were probably 2 to 3 apps on the far top left-hand side of the screen. It appeared hacked because of how the apps appeared to not be centered on the screen, but instead it looked as if the apps were falling off the edge of the screen. It looked all altered. It did not look like how a regular iPhone or Android, Samsung smartphone would have their apps. Fat Tinkerbell felt like something was off. She had a gut feeling in that moment. The two girls laughing, the phone being unlocked, tapped and altered, the three jerks that hate her, being her bosses for that shift, well, for this shift specifically, the RoboCop. Not only that, but Fat Tinkerbell was still very new at this job. It would look very bad for her, very unprofessional if she was caught. Not only using a phone while on duty and on uniform, but also snooping through a stranger's lost phone. It would have caused her to receive a write-up, or most likely get fired. So Fat Tinkerbell had all of that going through her head. But besides her breaking the rules, she couldn't shake off the feeling of something going wrong, or something there that might be wrong. Regarding what she chose to do or regarding the phone. Something just felt off to her. She couldn't help but feel that maybe the lost phone is some sort of trick, or that the two girls with the mom are involved. Or more than likely, that the three captains, three jerks, are somehow involved. But that was just how Fat Tinkerbell thought. It was just Fat Tinkerbell being paranoid after that write-up. After how those captains behaved with her, or how it's more than obvious that they don't like her, and how the RoboCop was this jock-like character that looked more like a bully from an 80s movie. All of that combined. It was a lot to scare little red Fat Tinkerbell, but not enough to stop her uncontrollable curiosity. Let this story be a reminder that curiosity killed the cat. Because after this story, I bet all of you will learn a thing or two about what curiosity can do to you. Be warned. You have been warned. From this point forth, the story becomes more inappropriate, graphic, and disturbing. Please be warned. This story is not for the faint of heart. Fat Tinkerbell begins to go through the unlocked lost phone. It had an app called WhatsApp, but it did not really have like a Facebook or an Instagram or what most people would have on their phones. In WhatsApp, it appeared that whoever owned the phone was talking to several people, several friends, and family. More than one could count. It was also all in Spanish, as Fat Tinkerbell herself is Hispanic and fluent in Spanish. She could understand the messages and what was being said in there. But all conversations seemed basic and pointless, so Fat Tinkerbell disregarded whatever was going on in WhatsApp. The other apps seemed to be useless, just phone settings apps or translate to English apps, stuff that doesn't matter. There was not that many apps in that phone at all. Fat Tinkerbell then realized that the most information about a person is held in the gallery or photos app of any phone. Fat Tinkerbell got all excited to finally get into the photos of this unlocked phone. As soon as she opens the gallery app on this phone, it clearly had its albums and many pictures of all kinds. But the last image that was in this phone either downloaded or taken or recorded. The very last one before this person lost that phone, and this is what scarred Fat Tinkerbell for life. The very last file. It was a video. It was very clear what was happening in the video. I won't use words that'll get me in trouble. But let's just say, it was extremely disturbing. It was disgusting. It was sickening. It was horrible. It was something so horrible to watch or see at all. It was something depraved, despicable, and perverted. Let's just say it had to do with a naked man and a live hen. A live chicken or hen, as you would call it. Awful! I'm sure you can connect the dots. Fat Tinkerbell saw the play button to that awful-looking video, and chose to play the video. The video began, and it seemed that the naked man was initiating with the hen. Fat Tinkerbell didn't finish the video. She cut the video off when she realized that the hen was alive. Basically, the older man, probably in his late 30s or 40s, was trying to do something nasty to the hen. Something that is for a grown man and grown woman. But like I said, Fat Tinkerbell didn't get to see if anything actually ended up happening to that innocent poor little animal, since she cut off the video. After seeing 2 seconds of that aroused man trying to initiate with that poor innocent animal, Fat Tinkerbell was scarred for life. Fat Tinkerbell was not the same after that 2-second experience. She was left all confused, disgusted, and disturbed. She immediately felt at a disadvantage and like a victim. She felt as if the RoboCop, the Harry Potter, and the weed guy planned this. Or that they set this up for Fat Tinkerbell to grab the phone and snoop through it. That they knew she would look through it. It truly did feel like that, considering the fact that they had already tried to mess with her regarding that first write-up. Also considering the fact that they gave her the stank eye and treated her poorly. Especially since the RoboCop was very strict and serious looking. After having witnessed what was some of the most disturbing content in her life, Fat Tinkerbell didn't know whether to throw the phone into a bush in the darkness of the night, or the lake by the maze, or a trash can, or whether to keep it and try to find out the mystery stranger owner of the phone, or hand the phone over to the 3 jerks. More specifically, the RoboCop. Well, for one, she definitely didn't want to view that image or the preview of that video once more. She certainly wanted the phone gone from her grasp more than anything. She thought to herself, if this really is a prank from the 3 captains, if it's a setup from them, they would know that I got rid of the phone if I chose to go that route. They would ask me if someone handed me a lost phone. And then I'd have to lie and say that I've never received a phone. And they would know it's a lie and that I'm lying, and they'd use my lie as an advantage to get me fired. On the other hand, if I chose to keep the phone to inspect it further, they would also know that I'm lying and basically stealing a lost phone. Either way, if I chose to throw the phone into the lake or keep it for myself, it would still make me look bad, look like a thief. And the 3 jerks would use my lying and me stealing a lost phone to their advantage to get me fired. To get rid of me. The last and final option would be to simply hand the lost phone over to the team captain himself, RoboCop. Fat Tinkerbell thought long and hard about all these options for a while. She sat through it. All traumatized, scarred, disturbed. Not herself anymore. She did feel as though the 3 captains might have been involved because of how they know where she is located, as she is posted in a location that they know of. All the employees like Fat Tinkerbell are all located somewhere everyone knows. It didn't really matter if Fat Tinkerbell wanted to hide in an area or not. If Harry Potter and Weed Guy wanted to find her or spy on her, they could just read the schedule where it says who will be where at what time, and they'd easily find her with ease. And let's not forget the fact that they hate her and want her gone. Fat Tinkerbell imagines that maybe she could turn the phone into the captain's and pretend she had never snooped through the phone. Because in reality, if Fat Tinkerbell had not snooped through the phone and turned it in, she would be fine. She would not know of the sick content that the phone contains. Ignorance is bliss. And if it had truly been a sick prank on part of the RoboCop and Harry Potter, she would still not know what they would be talking about. Or what they had planned. If you do not know about something, you do not worry about it. But on the other hand, even if she had not looked through the phone, the 3 jerks would still believe that she had looked through the phone, and she would still be this victim of bullying, this target for them to laugh at, this laughingstock. Not only that, but if she turns the phone into them, and it had not been a prank from the 3 jerks, they could think that maybe Fat Tinkerbell downloaded that content onto the phone and handed it to them for them to see it and what it contains. Therefore turning Fat Tinkerbell into the bully, into the bad guy, into the sick person. They could use the lost phone in her possession in several ways against her to get her in trouble and ultimately get her fired. Fat Tinkerbell thought all of this through and more. She was running out of time, since soon it would be time for her to switch posts with another employee. And RoboCop would have to call in all the employees into the office all at once for the switch to take place. Fat Tinkerbell chose to go with the last option, turn the phone into her shift captain and pretend to have never snooped through the phone. Fat Tinkerbell chose to grab the bull by its horns and stand her ground no matter what happened. She said to herself, whatever is to happen might as well happen. I'm done beating myself up and being this coward little scared mouse. To hell with the RoboCops and Harry Potters in this job. They can shove the lost phone with their sick videos up their beep. And so Fat Tinkerbell announced through the mic, "Hey RoboCop, someone handed me a lost phone just now. What do I do?" And just to let you know, when Fat Tinkerbell uses the mic on the walkie-talkie, all the employees and captains on the shift can hear it, since they all carry a walkie-talkie. RoboCop then responds, "Okay, just bring it to the office." At that point Fat Tinkerbell had no choice because everyone now knows that she received a lost phone and that she is bringing it to the office. Fat Tinkerbell now wanted to go back to some of her first options of throwing the phone into the lake or the trash can. But how would she then explain herself when asked about the phone? She seriously had no choice now that she announced it. And now she was regretting her decision. Fat Tinkerbell this time really was engorged in fear, because now they would truly look into the phone and find that video. For sure. In the case that they never planned the lost phone situation, or were in any way involved in that whole lost phone situation. In other words, Fat Tinkerbell is causing them to find that video. Moving on. Fat Tinkerbell does as she is told. Because she has no choice now. Because the RoboCop is her boss. She arrives at the office and unsure of how to feel, she opens up that door and there she sees the Harry Potter, the RoboCop and the weed guy all in there together in this ghetto little office. Like presumed. Obviously they all look at her because she is the person entering. RoboCop approaches Fat Tinkerbell, and Fat Tinkerbell, giving off a worried, scared facial expression, hands the phone over to the RoboCop. The RoboCop then begins to ask her about how she got the phone. He says, "Where did you get this phone? Who gave you this phone?" Fat Tinkerbell then describes the two girls and how they looked, their physical appearance. And Fat Tinkerbell, being the ignorant ding-dong that she tends to be, uses the name of a color to describe their race. As one of the captains did too. RoboCop then begins to lecture Fat Tinkerbell about how they do not use that word to describe people. And Fat Tinkerbell agrees. But she was more concerned about how that vile phone was now inside RoboCop's grip. Then Fat Tinkerbell begins to wonder, why is this RoboCop guy asking me who handed me the phone and in what location the phone was found? Like, I understand that he is the captain of the shift or whatnot, and that he is supervisor and does manager-like duties, but does he seriously need to know where a random lost phone was found? And why did he ask me who handed me the phone? That made Fat Tinkerbell a bit suspicious of the three jerks, and mainly the RoboCop. Those questions made it seem like they are involved with the lost phone situation, and that it is indeed a prank. At that point Fat Tinkerbell wanted to ask for the phone back from the RoboCop. But how could she? She's just this brand new employee. Fat Tinkerbell wasn't paying attention to the facial expressions of the three jerks whatsoever. She was so disgusted and disturbed that all she wanted to do was to leave. So she then says, "May I use the restroom?" as an excuse to leave the office at that moment. And nothing could calm her down from her trauma except to contact her sister through text. Once in the restroom and without that vile phone in her reach, Fat Tinkerbell then begins telling the story of the lost phone to her sister Valeruca. Fat Tinkerbell was in the restroom for a while as she expressed her terror and experience to her sister. She then goes back into the office to not look like she was skipping work forever. And as soon as she does so, it appeared like Harry Potter had been laughing and mentioning either a woman or a video, but everyone in the office got all quiet. As soon as Fat Tinkerbell stepped in, it got really silent. RoboCop then turns to Fat Tinkerbell and he tells her that she may go on her lunch break and that he is going to cover her break, while having a funny look on his face. RoboCop then leaves the office, and Fat Tinkerbell now has no choice but to sit inside this office with Harry Potter and the weed guy. Luckily she has her phone with her, so that she could just hide away by looking down at her phone and appear to be minding her own business. Unfortunately her phone didn't save her from what was to happen next. Everyone was quiet in this tiny office as Fat Tinkerbell was there enjoying her break where she could freely enjoy the use of her phone without getting in trouble. When suddenly, the weed guy says, "Hey Fat Tinkerbell, are you okay?" And Harry Potter tries to hide a smile. Fat Tinkerbell then answers with, "Yes, I'm fine," hoping to end the conversation right there. Then Weed Guy replies, "Are you sure? Because it looks like you're not." Fat Tinkerbell then had no idea how to answer to that. She felt uncomfortable, and it was more than clear that both those jerks either found the video when she turned in the phone to RoboCop, or they created the entire lost phone prank, and now they were literally bullying Fat Tinkerbell to her face. She keeps the discomfort to herself and continues to pretend that she hasn't seen anything, and pretend that she isn't bothered by anything. She looks down and says, "Well, I had a nightmare." Weed Guy continues to bully and pick on Fat Tinkerbell by asking, "What kind of nightmare?" As Harry Potter tries to hide his obvious laughter, Fat Tinkerbell tries to convince them that she doesn't remember the nightmare, as they didn't believe her. Basically, it looked like these two nerds with glasses on, looking like a pair of Harry Potters, were picking on this one super fat, super light-skinned white girl with puffy hair. That is pretty much what that scenario looked like inside that tiny office. A better name for that scenario would be called low-key bullying, because you can't tell that there is bullying taking place. It just sounds like a bunch of questions being asked to this new girl. Fat Tinkerbell now believed it was truly an intended prank or harassment. She now believed that the RoboCop and the two nerds created the lost phone situation. That somehow they got those two girls and that mom to hand that phone over to Fat Tinkerbell, and they knew that Fat Tinkerbell would snoop through that phone because she couldn't help her curiosity. They had been stalking her and planning for this to happen all along. Fat Tinkerbell was being bullied to her face. Weed Guy then turns to Harry Potter and says, "Hey, did you know that there's this sandwich in McDonald's called Chicken McGangbang?" And Harry Potter laughs. Then Weed Guy turns to Fat Tinkerbell and says that it is a delicious sandwich and that she should try it. Fat Tinkerbell realizes that the bullying has taken a whole turn, and she says, "I need to use the restroom," and she leaves. Fat Tinkerbell never had she experienced bullying of that degree or harassment of that type in her life. She felt depressed for the animal that suffered through that animal abuse that was taking place in the video, and depressed because of how these people felt about her. Those three jerks are her captains, her teachers, her supervisors. They are the people she would have to turn to with any problems she is having. Those were the people Fat Tinkerbell would have to trust. And there they were, bullying and harassing her to her face. Fat Tinkerbell then hides in a hall and cries. She also couldn't come to understand how those grown men were making jokes about an animal suffering through animal abuse and trying to bully her with that content. It was unimaginable. After Fat Tinkerbell cried for a while, she feared seeing these people again. Those three jerks, those three perverts, were people Fat Tinkerbell wished to never had met in her entire life. Those three psychopaths were now pure evil in her eyes. Her lunch break time was running out, and she'd have to go back into that office for orders from the RoboCop. Fat Tinkerbell decides to continue to play the "I didn't snoop through that phone" card. And she grabs whatever bravery she has left and makes her way back to the office. Once she enters the office, the Weed Guy and Harry Potter were gone. RoboCop was sitting in a desk that faces Fat Tinkerbell at the entrance. He appeared to be focused typing on the computer. She stands there silent, not looking at him and hiding away on her phone. It was beyond obvious to everyone that she had seen the content on that phone, and that all three of them had seen it too. RoboCop then says while typing and not making eye contact with Fat Tinkerbell, with his serious expression and frown-looking face, "Are you okay?" Fat Tinkerbell responds, "I'm fine." RoboCop on the other hand continued to type and not pay much mind to her or the overall situation, and he then tells her to go to her next post. Fat Tinkerbell agrees and does as she is told. She felt relieved that RoboCop didn't bully her the way that the other two nerds did. It did appear that he might have been involved or planned the prank. By how he asked her if she is okay. Because he wouldn't ask her that for no reason and out of the blue. There was a reason behind that question. It was still bullying, but not to the extent that Weed Guy took it, alongside his daddy Harry Potter. Which kind of confused Fat Tinkerbell. If I hadn't mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. RoboCop has the appearance of an actual bully. His face, his physical appearance, his emotions, his behavior, his tone of voice, his type of voice, RoboCop gives out the impression of a bully more than anyone in the world. And that is not an exaggeration. Literally. The body, face, personality of a bully in any movie, preferably an 80s movie, but still. That is why Fat Tinkerbell felt so confused as to why the two cringe nerds bullied her more than RoboCop himself. All in all, from that moment on, Fat Tinkerbell decided to never trust those three psychopaths in her life. That day she learned who they were and the type of people they truly are. That day Fat Tinkerbell felt sorry for herself like never before, and she cried the rest of that day. Fat Tinkerbell started going through her past memories. Fat Tinkerbell had been bullied all her life. From the moment she stepped into school to the moment she stepped into work or any job. She experienced bullying from males and females of her age range. She experienced hate and bullying from her own family members and especially her younger attractive sister. When the years flew on by and Fat Tinkerbell befriended her younger sister after many years of hate. Her sister would tell her you look bullyable as a joke to Fat Tinkerbell. And even though it was a joke, and they were now actual sisters and behaved like actual sisters, Fat Tinkerbell knew she was right. That night, as traumatized, scarred, upset, and as much of a victim as she felt, Fat Tinkerbell pushed through, knowing that she has a home to return to at the end of the shift, a family that loves her, a mom and dad that are there for her. A sister she loves and is her best friend in the world. She rests assured that she has her entire family to turn to in any worst-case scenario. And that this is just another job she could easily quit. After a couple hours of Fat Tinkerbell walking her rounds in the maze, she truly began to think about quitting and finding a new job. She called her sister once more to tell her about the entire conversation between her and the weed guy, and how the three jerks behaved that night. Surely Fat Tinkerbell's sister was now also convinced that this was an actual planned prank and that it is bullying. The rest of that night went by, and Fat Tinkerbell went home without a problem. RoboCop was minding his own business after the two nerds left, and not talking to Fat Tinkerbell whatsoever. Which was a good thing. When Fat Tinkerbell made it home safely, she went straight to her sister and told her the entire story of the lost phone in detail. That is when Fat Tinkerbell truly wished to quit and her sister agreed that she should quit. End of story. And this is the end of the story of the lost phone. If you wish to read this story yourself, the written version is below in the description. You can also look up EmyyWolf Fat Tinkerbell online. Anywhere online. If you wish to hear the story of the write-up, you may go to my previous video or go to my channel. If you wish to hear more stories of this sort, please leave a comment below telling me what you think. Or to talk about if you have experienced something similar. Also, if you want to know what the future stories are about, and you want a spoiler, you can again go to my DeviantArt and find my Fat Tinkerbell series. There are almost 15 stories that follow, so be sure to look for that. Keep in mind that these are true stories experienced by me, EmyyWolf. Fat Tinkerbell is just a secret nickname to describe how I looked at the time. Anyway, all my links are down below. You can reach out to me to any of those. My Facebook groups are Controversial Corner, Flat Level Earth, and Flat World Discussion. If you have Facebook, feel free to join those groups. The truth matters. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe or like. And I'll see you in the next story.